I'm making a first-person shooter fairy tale. Basically, it's this Disney-esque horror game where you run around this park with a bunch of creepy characters and blow their heads off. So my publisher, 3D Realms, they really love the idea, but frankly, the game doesn't quite feel like a first-person fairy tale just yet. And that really does have to change if I want to make them happy. So I spent 6 days trying to do exactly that. Can I make this run-of-the-mill first-person shooter look more like a fairy tale and really capture an audience in just 6 days? Or am I going to have an interesting phone call with my publisher? All right, so the first day I basically just grimified all of our basic standard textures that we've been creating and using for the last couple of years. See, the game looked very simple and clean and again, like a run-of-the-mill first-person shooter. And instead, because we're gonna market this game as a horror game set in this fairy tale Disney World environment, I need to make the textures look disgusting. And we're gonna see if we can create some kind of smoothness map out of this. That's our smoothness map. Let's take a look and see if this works. Crank up the smoothness here. See how it helps, guys? It looks like spit or something is thrown on there. Kind of cool. Let's go ahead and knock this out. This right here, let's grimify these. Look how simple this is. It's like a toon game. So we don't want that, right? I'm thinking it's gonna have like threading in it. Yeah, but we can definitely use that paper texture. This paper texture is really effective. I love using paper textures like this. So we're gonna do this. Really crank up that contrast here, guys. Set it to multiply. There we go. Pretty good. We're gonna make it not so intense, but we're gonna add a little textile texture to it. Maybe even a normal map. On the second day, I just continued to grimify these textures. I really learned something in these 2 days. I learned that a single texture tweak, or it could be just some art tweaks for your 2D game, a tiny little texture change can make a huge difference. And the reason why is because that single texture that you spent, let's say, 2 hours working on, you can use it throughout the entire game. So one room or one lobby can look totally different with a single texture change. This was especially true when I was working on the panels for the ceiling. Originally, and ceilings always have this problem in any first-person shooter. Basically, if it's just flat and it's just a single flat white texture, even if you add some grime to it, it's gonna look boring because it's just a flat plane. So instead, I added tiny little shadows to the edges of the square, and suddenly now it looks like a paneled ceiling. Adding a little bit of a grid to flat surfaces goes a long way. We could even do it another one here like this. Now it looks like there's like tiles on the ceiling, or like plaster tiles. We can create an ugly stain at the corner here, but we don't want it to look too unique. We want it to be more generic. Oh my goodness. What did I tell you guys? That is really gross. But it's a little too intense. Not intense. We're not making a camping game. What's wrong with you? And you know, my theory is we could probably go ahead and just add a little line here and a little line here, a little line here. And what's interesting is all you gotta do is fade out certain parts of these lines and they'll look like they're sort of the ambient occlusion. There we go. Kind of like that tile effect. It gives me old school vibes. But another thing I learned is just because it works on one surface doesn't mean you should do it on every surface. I don't know why, but the squares just really make a big difference. What do we do about that? I spent about an hour trying to replicate this look, creating wall panels. I loved the panel look so much that I tried to make it work for the walls, but sadly, I ended up scrapping that, and that's totally okay. If you're working on a game, it's okay to spend a couple hours trying something new and realizing it's just not for you. Yeah, you may have not made progress on your game, but you've learned a ton that you can use for your future games. Okay, now that we have these grimified, disgusting textures that we can use in this Disney-esque theme park, we also want to create some fairy tale models. In particular, I want to change the tower that we climb in this game. I want to change it to look more like a Disney castle. What does this have to do with the grimy textures though? Well, if I didn't grimify the textures and I just made a beautiful Disney environment, it wouldn't, well, make an impact. One of the best ways to capture an audience's attention is to slam two contradictory ideas together. Again, a great example, I say again because I love this game, I talk about it all the time. Cult of the Lamb does this really, really well. Super cute animal creatures, and you turn them into a cult sim. That is slamming two ideas together. The same is true with Twisted Tower. We're taking Disney-esque Willy Wonka vibes, and we're slamming them against disgusting, vile textures blood and guts. So I spent some time in Photoshop concepting out a castle. It needed to look like an Art Deco castle, which I had trouble Googling and finding, but ultimately just with some thin lines and very clean and precise patterns, I was able to create an Art Deco castle, or you might even call it an Art Nouveau castle. It had that Disney vibe, but it also matched the interiors of the game, which we had previously created when we were creating a more Art Deco hotel game. That was a whole other story, a whole other game. So we're trying to retrofit this new Disney vibe into an Art Deco vibe, and I think it worked out with this concept. I mean, you know, if you did striped flags, that might be pretty cool. Yep. Man, it's the little things, guys. Yeah, look. Now, we're a small team. I'm the art director, and I do a lot of different things, the code, the texture work. I do some modeling as well. I do some music as well, and I actually created this song for this environment. Gordon is doing the code, and Felipe is going to work on the 3D version of my tower mock-up, and he's also going to create some more Disney World-esque assets for the tower. While they work on that, I'm going to rework the UI. Currently, we have this god-awful UI right here, and instead, we want to create a more, again, a Willy Wonka or a Disney-esque vibe for our UI. Here's the thing about UI. The player sees it constantly. They see it through the entire game. UI is a great way to consistently reinforce a theme that your game carries. So in the case of, let's say, Alice Madness Returns, which by the way is a huge inspiration for me, they use UI in such a strong and effective way to continually remind the player what the game is about. It's about Alice in Wonderland, right? So if the environments don't necessarily communicate that, in this case, the Asian themed level doesn't really reinforce the Alice in Wonderland vibe, but because the UI is on screen, the player is reinforced that yes, they are in an Alice in Wonderland game. I need that to be true for Twisted Tower. Even though the environments aren't done yet and the set dressing isn't done yet, and hey, we have limited time, limited budget, so we might not make it perfect, this UI can still remind the player that, hey, this game is a Disney-esque Willy Wonka first-person shooter. And with your guys' help during the live stream, I ended up creating this really sweet UI for the weapon wheel. We tried a lollipop, we tried some candy corn, and we ended up on a deck of cards. Really great ideas. Thank you guys so much for bringing those to the stream. Yeah, like the question is, what kind of shapes out there are triangular that also fit in with the sort of Disney Alice in Wonderland vibe? Now that looks weird too. I think this is close. Oh, we're so close, guys. It just, all of it feels too complicated. Oh. What are we gonna do, guys? That's a mess. My give up. Oh, come on, you can figure it out, Thomas. Make the guns playing cards. That is so smart. Now, here's the thing about UI. It sounds like an afterthought. It sounds like a simple thing. UI is very difficult. It's very challenging. I actually tweeted about this and all of you responded that, yeah, you agree. UI takes a long time and it is difficult to get perfect. I think we're ready to make it. Well, we're not actually. We'll worry about the order after we make the smart object. It's getting really, yeah, getting messy. So 2 full days were spent trying to get this UI to work, and this is the end result. So as you can see, guys, now the intro to the game feels much more like a fairy tale first-person shooter. And when I collect all my weapons and I open up my weapon wheel, or I get hurt, or I look at the amount of money I have in the game, or my inventory, it feels like a fairy tale. And that is the goal.